Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today for the panel discussion on Halloween trends. We've got a lot to cover today. We're going to cover everything from basic product and merchandising trends, but also trends in the industry and how different regulations, things like that, are affecting all of us. I'm not going to go in depth on the bios of our panelists, but we'll provide those online. But I do want to introduce everyone. Starting at the end, we have Dorothy Kramer from Selling Halloween Magazine. Next to her is Ann Obarski. Ann is a merchandising and customer service expert. She is, in preparation for coming to the show, she traveled to a lot of different party and Halloween stores and has a very interesting outside the industry perspective, so we're excited to have her on the panel. Next to her, we have Chuck Martinez with In Character Costume Company. He's a very innovative member of our industry, and we appreciate him being here. Mark Beige with Rubies. Mark is, I know, has been tracking a lot of the different trade policy and regulatory issues that are facing us, and we're happy to have him here. Amal Soni is an innovative retailer from the Jacksonville, Florida area. Amal has, in addition to his brick and mortar stores, also has temporary and pop-up stores, and is recognized as one of the more creative marketers in our industry. So without further ado, let's get started. And Mark, I'd like to begin with you. We all know that over the past 4 years, there have been economic headwinds facing our industry. And putting that aside, what regulatory or trade policy issues do you think retailers and other manufacturers in this industry need to be aware of, and which ones concern you the most?
Probably they break down into two separate areas. One being the U.S. Customs, which is now taking a very different view, a dramatic departure from the long-standing policy of how they classify costumes, the effect of which is to shift a good chunk of costumes and related accessories into duty categories. This runs contrary to what's going on in many countries in the rest of the world, whereas Canada has just migrated to essentially a duty-free tariff situation on imported accessories. That's a challenge, and it's customs. I think they're groping and feeling their way because they certainly do not have a consistent policy. Customs, it's fair to say, doesn't even have a consistent interpretation of what's dutiable and what's not dutiable from one port in the United States to another port in the United States. So this will, I think this has got another year or two to go. I don't know that there's going to be any definitive policy before the election next year. The other, I think, major issue that I believe every manufacturer is going to agree is the overlapping and complicated regulations that pertain to product and product safety. The United States, due to the impetus was the lead and magnets and the Mattel toys, formed the Consumer Protection Service, which issued rules on all toys, which costumes became, actually it's all products, but toys especially. That actually, I think many of us view as almost a blessing, but that view of it being a blessing was short-lived. The blessing because I think all of us would accept and in fact embrace one set of laws that is consistent from coast to coast. Instead, we have a lot of laws that are piecemeal, that are specifically by states. Some of the most onerous states are, let's say, California, which has their own regulations, Illinois, which has many of its own regulations, and that makes a patchwork of overlapping laws so that your product can comply in 49 states, but not one state. And unfortunately, the U.S. government has not preempted all the states by setting whatever the laws are. I'm sure everybody would adapt to it, but it's very difficult to adapt to it when you have every state making their own laws. As I said, California has what I would refer to as the infamous Prop 65 law. And Prop 65 is unique. I think I've never come across that, and that it allows private enforcement by individual attorneys that are affectionately known as the bounty hunters. And these cases never go to trial. They make all kinds of accusations. They sue companies and all that. And they have their own standards and their own way of testing. Because even if you've tested a product and you have a passing test report according to California law and certainly according to federal law, it doesn't mean that when they test it on a different method, they're going to come up with a passed result. An example would be jewelry. Jewelry that's used for Halloween. The test would be the exposure, let's say on lead. The test would be the exposure on lead. Now, if you had a piece of jewelry that, let's say, had a couple of thousand parts per million of lead, but it were plated or encapsulated, there's no exposure issue because you would never be able to touch it, and particularly on a Halloween item, which you're going to use once a year. However, and if you test it in the normal protocol that would be accepted, they would test it for what they call a wipe test, and they would see that no lead, although there's inside this in the substrate, no lead comes off, and you'd get a passed test report. However, if somebody did a total solubility test, which means you dissolve it as if you ate it, but you're not really getting jewelry, you would come up with substantially more lead into the, and you'd have a failed test report. So you'd have this identical item in one protocol, you'd have a passed test report, in a different way of testing it, you'd have a failed test report. And again, these cases never go to trial because to bring a case like this to trial, you're talking 6 or 7 figures. So they eventually wind up selling because you weigh out, I can sell this for X number of dollars, or I can prove I'm right, and it'll cost me $300,000 to prove I'm right. And usually, after you get through the initial anger, common sense usually prevails. As a side note, to show you how extreme this has gotten, the regulations today call for less than 100 parts per million. That means that on a product that you buy for Halloween, which you use one day a year, it's required that you have less than 100 parts per million of lead. There isn't, I think you would be very hard pressed in the state of California to find any drinking water with less than 100 parts. The drinking water contains more than 100 parts per million because most of the pipes in California are lead. However, all public utilities, including water utilities, are exempt from Prop 65. So you have a crazy situation that the Halloween costume that you wear one day a year is in effect safer than the water you drink every day.
Yet at the same time, it's potentially adding to the cost that the retailers have to pay the manufacturers because of the hoops you have to jump through to.
Testing costs on the manufacturer is one of the today one of the major costs of doing business because these tests have a limited shelf life. You generally test it on production, usually on either 1 or 2 year cycle and all that. The tests are not inexpensive. They run into the hundreds or thousands of dollars depending on what your per product. So that, yes, it has added a major cost of doing business today.
And you have to keep doing it over and over again. You just don't test once. Every time you run a product again, a year later, I think,
yes,
right?
A year later.
Yeah, you have to pay for the tests and go through all that.
And it gets even more complicated. Hopefully the HIA the Halloween Industry Association is going to be able to convince the industry, but it gets even a little bit more complicated in that certain key majors, Walmart's, Target's, and et cetera, they have their own protocol. So you may have a test that conforms or shows that your product conforms with all applicable federal and state law, but Walmart says that's good, but we have our own standards. Now you got to test it to these standards.
Right.
Then you can get an order from another major and says, well, we have our own standards, and you wind up testing the same product 6 and 7 times. I'm sure you've experienced that.
Yes.
Well, Chuck, in addition to the cost that you're having to incur as a result of the testing regimen, I understand, and it's been reported pretty widely, that the labor costs are increasing in China. Is that, to what extent is that affecting our industry? And if it is, are there other low-cost producing countries that you're looking at? Or on the flip side, is it actually bringing any manufacturing back domestically?
Complicated question.
Complicated question.
Right,
I'd like to break it down.
Yeah.
Chuck, because you're a major manufacturer, but Jordan, I'll start this.
Why don't you
okay?
please? No,
All right. The cost structure in China has definitely gone increasing and will continue to increase. The reason for that is several issues. Number one is you start with the currency. There was a time that the Hong Kong dollar, which is historically pegged to the U.S. dollar at 7.8 to the U.S. dollar, used to be that you would get about 1.3 Chinese RMB for one Hong Kong dollar, which meant that the Chinese currency was about 9 to the U.S. dollar. The Chinese currency is probably today about 6.2 or 6.3, and it's strengthening continuously. You all read in the papers how our politicians from Washington are pushing China to not to link their currency, but to float their currency, which is a polite way of saying increase the value of the currency. The flip side of that is it increases the cost of anything made in China. So the Chinese currency, it's not a question if the Chinese currency is going up or down. It's going in one direction only, up. It's a question of how fast and how much. That's issue number one. Issue number two is that China, my first trip to China, I remember very clearly, Richard Nixon was resigning the presidency live on TV. China is no longer a poor country. They have a great work ethic. There's a lot of kudos that should be given to China. The Chinese system is certainly not a communist system. The economy is probably one of the most capitalist economies that you'll find anywhere, including the United States. But certainly, to their credit, they've probably pulled 1 billion people out of poverty. The standard of living is certainly on the rise. It's very visible with the shops and the consumer goods. I think we would all be very hard pressed to find an alternative for the amount of production that China produces. It's the workshop of the world.
And financing that they provide.
And financing and logistics.
Infrastructure.
I mean, we dance around with Southeast Asia, particularly Vietnam and Thailand, India to some extent, Pakistan, but in the foreseeable future, I don't see any of them really replacing China.
I would agree. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you've noticed it, probably you have. There's always a silver lining. The silver lining on this is that as you look around in China, you say, gee, these are consumers. They love American, they now have spendable income. Because, so that you're saying that they don't want the knockoffs, they want the real licensed items, they want particularly American style items. So the flip side of this is it's starting to become a market that I know we're starting to look into.
Right, yeah.
China is very interesting because they have had a one-child policy for since Mao Zedong, probably for 30, 40 years. The effect of a one-child policy is you have an aging population. And I, for one, don't believe China is going to take over the world and everything else economically, because they're going to have the same problems that Japan has today. Their population is aging very rapidly. The other thing is, well, we've all seen an immigrant family that comes to the United States and they work very hard. I don't know if you have Korean grocery stores or not, but they're working there for 25 hours of a 24-hour day. And then you see their children and the work ethic, they become Americanized. By the third generation, they're very Americanized. You see this happening in China today, is that you go into, and I'm not talking about Shanghai and I'm not talking about Beijing, but you can go into Yiwu and many of the other major cities, and you see Chinese young adults in the torn jeans worn really low with the chains on and all that, and you look at, and the colored hair, orange hair, green hair and all that, and you say, these are not the factory workers of tomorrow in China. These are the consumers. And you have more and more of that that's happening in China.
Right. But China is a big place, so the manufacturing keeps migrating to more inland, the farm-based communities that have lower labor, that haven't been sort of westernized, so to speak. So that's,
So you see it moving more. It's more likely to move
within
inside of China rather than spreading out to the Philippines.
Probably.
I think it's a multi-pronged. It will move in the interior of China, northern part. When I say northern part, north of Shanghai, into what used to be known as Manchuria, opposite Korea. As far as bringing production back, to some extent. The problem that we have in the United States is that there is very little left of the textile industry in America.
Right.
So you are not buying the raw materials. It's most of it's made abroad.
Right.
And then in the United States, we've educated and trained our children to be doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs and all that. At the same time, we're trying to hold back the immigration. So you have an issue of who's going to produce this stuff, who's going to sew it.
Right.
You can't get the assembly, the sewing facilities.
Right.
You can't get the labor to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we were probably, I mean, I think you still manufacture some domestically, which we admire, and we were the last to go, I think, of the smaller manufacturers, and we used to do stuff in Mexico and in kind of Southern California, but it was just, we just couldn't make it anymore because the fabrics were all coming from China. The labor pool domestically kept shrinking, so there was sort of it was an impossible combination for an American manufacturer to succeed at. So our success is all about creativity, merchandising, you know, the fun stuff, we think, you know. Mark's talking about the harsh realities that we all have to deal with, that hopefully as smart manufacturers, we can protect you retailers from, because this is kind of like, you're like, well, why are these my problems? Well, they're not directly your problems. They're kind of our problems, but if you see consternation or hesitation from manufacturers, you know, and you hear us talk about all those testing problems, I mean, Mark's doing a great job of sort of delineating that, and if you're wondering why prices are getting raised, trust me, manufacturers are probably eating internally on their own profit margin as much as the price raise as they're passing on, because we don't like to raise prices because it diminishes volume, and we thrive all on volume. And but there's a lot of forces at work, so no one's really being greedy as much as we're just trying to figure it out, and you know.
Sure.
You know.
I think manufacturers are all very aware. If you have a costume that at the end of the day, somebody's got to buy this product, the end consumer. So if you have a costume that you're selling for $29.98, it's dangerous to go to raise that one to $34.98 because your volume is going to drop off. Your volume is going to drop off, and our volume is going to drop off.
Right, absolutely.
So we're very, very cognizant of what is the ultimate retail price of this thing that it's going to sell for.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue from this sort of geopolitical scene to the more local day in the life of a retailer. Amal, I know that like any other retail segment of the retail industry, we have there's a lot of pressure from different channels on especially independent retailers. You've the big box, the e-commerce pressures. How do you as a retailer, or what innovative things are you doing to cut through the clutter so the consumer can find you and find your products?
Thank you, Jonathan. We've got very aggressive with our marketing. We feel that even though there's a lot of clutter, some aggressive marketing can break through that, and customers are responding more to discounts and coupons. Our coupon redemption rate is up far higher than it was a few years ago. We're using our POS data to truly analyze the shopping habits of that customer once they bring in that coupon. So we track what they spent above and beyond what you gave them for free. And by paying attention to that, you can modify your next ad campaign and find the sweet spot, so to speak. But lately we've been, like during Halloween, we ran a $60 off a $100 purchase, which a lot of people said, that sounds pretty crazy, don't do that. But we ran that, and our sales were up almost 260% for the 4 days that we ran that sale. We ran it early on in the month of October. It was the first weekend of October, and we showed that we could actually move the business when we did that. After analyzing the numbers in black and white, yes, we gave up margin, but in the grand scheme of things, and if you look at the season as a whole, the percentage that we gave up was a very low percentage for what we got back from the customers. We believe that the customers that are still spending money out there, we need to concentrate on pulling them back into the store one more time a year. In party stores, I believe the average is 1.8 trips per year a mom will visit your store. If you can increase that one time, the person that's still spending money will come back and spend it. So even though the pool of customers is shrinking, try to attract the customers that are still spending money.
To what extent do you track the average ticket of your customers that are coming in?
We'll track the average ticket globally in the store, and then we'll track the average ticket by a coupon.
Gotcha.
So that's two numbers to watch out for. So you can see, did that coupon work? I gave away X amount, but my average ticket was higher. For example, we run a coupon that's a free $5 coupon. I run it twice a year, and it's free $5. Come in and spend $5. What we've seen with that is the customer walks into the store and goes, I have this coupon. I don't know why I'm here. I don't have a party, but I'm here to spend this $5. And you'd think people would just spend $5 and walk out of the store, and I'd be giving them something away for free. But our average ticket on that runs $9.37 after the discount. So we're not losing money on that coupon.
Right, got it. Well, and Amal was addressing things he was doing on the outside of his four walls. I know that before you came to the show, you had done some research on our industry and had gone into different Halloween retailers, and I believe some party retailers too. If you would, what did you see that you liked, and what kind of things did you see that you think retailers ought to be learning from either other retailers, or even from things they're seeing here at the show?
Well, I think it's very important that those people who are what we call temporary, and I hate that word because temporary to me means let's get in and get out. And the idea for me is how professional can you keep that store looking, because that customer is going to remember you next year and the year after and the year after. So I'm really advising anybody who's in even that temporary location that you've got more than enough time before you go into that particular facility, whatever it happens to be or whatever it used to be, to analyze it and say, what kind of fixturing do I need? What kind of lighting do I need? What kind of music do I need? What can I do as far as all the senses are concerned? Because that customer who's coming into a temporary store also shops in Walmart and Target and all the rest of the stores, and they have a certain status, a certain standard they expect. One of the things that I saw as far as doing what I call a mystery shop was that there's just such basic things of cleanliness and whether it was the fitting room areas for people to try on clothing, whether it was just the lighting itself when I came in of a very dark type of feel. And in one situation, it was right smack next to a Jo-Ann Fabrics. Well, we all know that Jo-Ann Fabrics loves to have all that stuff. And the difference between the two and the women, because we know that 80% of the business is done by women, were coming from the Halloween store going back into Jo-Ann's. So I think that there is obviously an area of learning how to do very good merchandising and making sure that your brand is not diminished by what you look like in your merchandising.
And I know merchandising has always been important. I mean, in the 1800s, if you had a crummy looking store, it was a crummy looking store. But in this day and age, when there are so many more options for the consumer, don't you think, Ann, that it's that much more important that your store actually be an event rather than just a nice, clean place with nice, friendly people to shop?
Well, and we're seeing across the country, whatever type of vendor or whatever type of retailer it is, one of the things that's bringing people back are events. That's the key. We're doing inbound marketing. What can we do to attract, as he said, I don't want 2 times. I want to figure out if I can get them back 6 times.
Right.
Because the event type of things, whether it's something like the culinary that was here at the show, doing some type of food area, because we all know how big that is on HGTV and the Food Network and so forth. Maybe we do something with makeup and so forth. What are you doing that is an event that person's going to come in and enjoy the event, but they're also going to buy stuff when they're there, and they're also going to tell other people, because that's what we know is driving more businesses, that contagious experience. That's what they want. I don't care if it's a grocery store, I don't care if it's your barbershop, they want an experience.
Excellent.
And you make a really good point, because so much of the technology to do that now is so much cheaper.
Sure.
You know, lighting is cheap because you can buy through the internet. Mannequins are very inexpensive now. Mannequins used to be, you know, years ago $800, and now you can find them on the web for like $80, and they're decent. I mean, we had In-Character buy the really cheap mannequins and fluff them up, you know, and just trying to make that special experience for people that differentiates from Walmart and the mass market. And even video projectors are now $299 for something you could do a pretty bright image with that was just thousands of dollars years ago, and you can run it off of your iPhone, literally. So there's lots of things that you can really do inexpensively to create that magic that will differentiate and bring people back, in our opinion. So.
And if I could say one other thing, the one thing that has changed that and has made it a non-negotiable is the fact that we have the internet now.
Yeah.
And if a customer doesn't like something, they so easily can go and make a comment on how much they hated it. And we know that the internet is not in pencil, it's in ink. And once your brand has been tarnished because somebody said it's a dirty store, I wouldn't let my children go in and try on a costume, there's something I didn't like about it, it made me feel icky. We all know that we go on the internet and look for reviews before we buy something. That one particular area has made us all do business differently.
Right. Well, Dorothy, now speaking of actually the products themselves, I know you have a lot of contact with retailers and with the manufacturers. What trends are you seeing in the coming season, and then beyond that, if you have any insight into your crystal ball is that clear?
What isn't a trend in Halloween? Everything kind of has its season, but overall, you're always going to have your perennials. The big trend, I think, is that everybody really wants to find that little bit of extra detailing that sets it apart, because you're going to have your witches, vampires with Twilight are going to persist. So it's important to have products that are just that, have that extra attention to detail. Overall, the licensing business is huge for a reason. Kids see their superheroes or their pop culture icons, and if they see that costume, that's what they gravitate to. So pick your kids' brains, or if kids are in your store, find out what they're paying attention to, because odds are that's what they're going to want to be next Halloween. I've also been seeing a lot of neon. I think that the bright colors are really going to be popular in the coming years. And accessories, from what I've been hearing, people really want to make their own costumes or add on to costumes that they had last year or recreate things. So I think the accessory market is where you're going to see a lot of growth and possibilities for you to merchandise in unique ways and add on to your costume sales in ways that you didn't expect.
Have you noticed any change in how consumers are actually getting their ideas for what they want to be for Halloween?
Oh, absolutely. I think that now more than ever, they do see anything, Jersey Shore kids, or, who would have thought that I'm from the Jersey Shore? So I wanted to slip my wrists when I saw that, and I'm sorry to Ruby's.
Right. He was here last year.
I know. I'm sorry. And then the other thing is that they look at it as an opportunity to create their own or be that character that maybe isn't a movie star, but it's something that's popped up on YouTube. Now that's always surprising to me, when something that's become a YouTube sensation, and that's what kids want to dress up like.
That's great. Well, somehow we've come close to running out of time already. The panelists might disagree, but I'd like to have you up here the rest of the day. But I know you have other things to do. But I would like to finish with one question, and I'll address it to you, Amal. I know that we've had some good weekend Halloweens lately, but next year, I believe it's, if I've calculated correctly, we've got a Wednesday Halloween. How do you shift your buying strategy, your marketing, your merchandising strategy to deal with that? And do you see different types of product selling that from a Saturday Halloween, say?
I believe that Wednesday Halloween, the sales will definitely be weaker than other days. Traditionally, I would adjust my buying a little lower, but in this year, I believe that the aggressive marketing is what's going to pull me through this year. So I'm actually increasing my buy proportionately to account for those promotions, because you can do a promotion,
I just heard cheers going up throughout the hall.
You can do a promotion, but if you don't have the inventory to back it up, you've got a problem, because you can't give away everything. Some of the stuff that you give away, you got to have something to sell to make money on it.
Right. Is there a product mix shift you go through, or is it pretty much the same?
For me, it's pretty much the same. I know that other people in the industry do adjust their adults versus children's quantities. You may know more of that. The adult.
Generally, as our experience has been that the children's market is pretty stable regardless what day of the week Halloween is on. It's the adult end of the market that tends to fluctuate, getting stronger on as you approach the weekend on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. However, if I had to do some speculation of 2012, I think it's going to be better than 2011. I think that Wednesday is a better day than a Monday. In addition, let's not forget that 2012 is an election year. That generally bodes well for Halloween, because you're right before the election. The candidates are they're spending money, both parties, and number two, they're trying to make people feel good.
And stock market usually goes up.
The stock market goes up before the election.
Typically.
Depending on who gets in, it might go down the next month, but that's after Halloween.
Yeah.
The economy seems to be on the mend. It seems to be improving. It's not getting any worse. It seems to be slowly improving. So provided that Europe doesn't go off into the deep end, I think that we're looking at a progressively stronger economy as we go into the fall. So I think all of those factors give us an optimistic view on 2012.
Yes.
You would agree?
No, I think we're all feeling like we're kind of troughed out there and we're beginning to climb out, but I think it's been very challenging. You know, we miss a lot of the smaller retailers. You know, Incarrict has been a very kind of specialty company, and we're growing. But you know, there's a lot of people missing at the show today. You know, that I'm like, where are our friends? You know, the small retailers, the independent retailers, and I think some of them are no longer with us because they just couldn't hang through the economy, and I think some just didn't want to come to this show because of costs. But I do think that the opportunities still exist, but smaller retailers, Halloween used to be so automatic. You know, in what I call the old days, when I started Disguise and when Mark was growing Ruby's massively, it was kind of like an easy business. You could just set up a Halloween store in a train station and people would just devour the merchandise. It was a very underserved marketplace, and then of course the entire world got into it. It got very saturated, but the major retailers have very limited as to really how they can merchandise and create an experience for a consumer. And I think that's where the independent, if they can sort of kind of look at this again with a new view, there's great opportunity. People want an experience that feels special. And, you know, and the world is losing their special experiences. Tower Records, gone, you know, and Borders, gone, you know. So Halloween specialty stores, and I know there's worries about like people shop you on the web and things like that, but I think those are things that we could all figure out how to address, that if you can create an experience for the consumer and offer them value, they will come, I believe, especially as the economy gets better. So
I also think that as the economy improves and gets better, you're going to see another phenomenon. In the last couple of years, as the general economy of the United States has had its problems, there's been a tremendous abundance of available stores on the market. Borders,
Absolutely.
dumped thousands of stores. So if you were a operator of temporary Halloween stores and you wanted 100 stores, you could have them. You wanted 1,000 stores. I mean, you know, in Florida, if you wanted to open up 5,000 temporary stores, the real estate is there.
Amal could have a whole subdivision of stores.
Right. Well, and we've had customers actually have come in and they said, well, I bought an old Toys R Us, and it's sort of, you know, it was really cheap, and there was cheap, inexpensive financing to buy it. So we're kind of recreating it into like a year-round store that's something you couldn't have bought that store 10 years ago, and it's literally selling for dimes on the dollar. So people are looking at it like, you know, to create an experience and create an opportunity from the real estate that wasn't around, because whenever there's adversity, that's someone's opportunity. So, and John, maybe a suggestion for the future, I'd love to see you guys have a workshop like this that was more interactive, where, with designers and stylists to say, here's stuff you could do for your store, you know, and here's a prop you can buy, and here's an inexpensive lighting prop that's $30, and you can buy 10 of them for $20 a piece, and here's this tweaky stuff to create a world within your store that is actually really pretty easy to do, because I trust you in character. Our booth looks I'm not plugging ourselves, but I guess I am. But you know, we kind of do things on the cheap. You know, we don't use a trade show company or anything, because we were a small company. We couldn't afford anything, so we just kind of went, well, this, you know, that looks nice, and that was inexpensive to do, and so I think that is where it's at for you guys to create this world, you know, that people want to participate in. But I think that would be a great thing for the show in the future to, you know, it feels like this is kind of a static experience, and the drudgery that Mark and I and everybody has to deal with of the testing and all that stuff.
Right.
You know, we try to protect you guys from that, hopefully, you know, as best we can. But the fun is like making it amazing and sharing how to do that at a price. And because obviously you can't spend $10,000 a store doing this, but you can probably spend $500 a store and be surprising with cleverness how much unbelievably better you can make the customer's experience and your merchandising outreach. So
that's fantastic. Well, unfortunately, that has to be the last word for today. But I very much appreciate all of our panelists, and thank you all for being here today. I hope you have a great rest of your show. Let's please give our panelists a